Hey guys, so today we're going to be working a little bit more on informational texts, and in specific, we're going to be looking at this idea of compare and contrast. Okay, so when we're talking about the idea of informational text right here, we're talking about this kind of umbrella term, right? And then compare and contrast is going to be a different type of informational text in itself, right? And so there's all these different types. Descriptive is something we've gone over, order and sequence is something we've gone over, and we're going to look at this idea of compare and contrast. Okay, there are about 5 different text structures in total in terms of like this type of writing. There are different types of writing, but we've gone over 3 of them, and then hopefully we'll be able to make it to all of them before we're ending, and we'll kind of go over these ones later, but these are the ones that we focused on right now. And the reason that I really wanted to focus this unit, this end of this year on this, is because this is the type of writing that you will most likely be reading and encountering on your day-to-day life when you leave school and enter into work. So descriptive, right? We are describing things. That's really big. Let me make that smaller. Sorry. We're describing things. What does it look like? How big is it? What can it do? What does it look like, basically, right? Order and sequence is kind of like your instructions. IKEA is the master of order and sequence because they can do it with no language, which is particularly difficult, and sometimes it's why it can be tricky to follow. It's you're saying that, step 1 is this, step 2 is that. This is kind of your order and sequence, right? And how do we build something? How do we make something? How do we do something? Well, today we're going to be looking at this idea of comparing and contrasting things, and sort of like what would that look like? So let's take a quick peek. So to compare and contrast is to show how two or more things are alike and different. So we'll have, thing A and thing B. Maybe thing A looks like this and thing B looks like this. Well, how are these two things similar and how are they different? So the image that I use is something a little bit like this. Now I couldn't get Word to fully cooperate, so I'm going to finish the picture like that, right? That idea of that Venn diagram. I'm sure you guys have seen this a lot, but the idea that, this is how they are the same, and this is how things are different. And I'll show you an example of this when I'm going through kind of a planning stage in a couple of slides. But that idea of like, these are the things that are the same about, the this shape and this shape, and these outer sections are the things that are different about them, right? So I could say something like, that they are both shapes, but this one is a square and this one is a triangle. I can say that, they're both 2D. I could say that they're both green because they're both green in this picture. This one might be taller. This one might be wider. So, in that way, this is kind of what a Venn diagram looks like. Again, I'll give you some more example kind of coming up really soon. But that's the sort of shape in general that I use to think about this type of writing. So if I can kind of compare two things, it's going to be a compare and contrast. So some signal words that are going to help you as the reader to know that you're reading something that is compare and contrast, or for you as a writer to let your reader know that you're writing something that is compare and contrast. Now keep in mind that there are a whole bunch of other signal words that you could use as well, but I don't want to overwhelm you with a list of like 50 different words that you could be using. So I kind of, I'm keeping it down to a couple of words that I think will work really well, and ones that are the most common that you'll see when you're reading something. Now again, I'll show you an example coming up, but when you see things while you're reading, like the word like, if something is like or something is unlike something, we know that we're comparing two things. Also, similar, different, right? Again, we have that idea of comparing and contrasting. 2, keep in mind that we are using the double O of the 2, not, these 2's, because this means when we have the 2 O's, it means as well as. as well as, or in addition to. In addition to something. So, I like that too. It was tall too. It means kind of as well as. So make sure that you have that distinction that there are two O's in this too. As well as, however, although, same as. These words are going to be words that, kind of tip me off to that idea that we're working with a compare and contrast. Okay, so, take a moment right now, pause this video, and write down these words right here. Because what I'm going to ask you to do later is to write a paragraph, right? In the same way that I've asked you to write a paragraph for the other two, I'm going to ask you to write a paragraph for this one, and I'm going to ask you to use some of these words right here, right? So if you pause this video and get these words down, that will help you out. Okay, ready? Okay, so before we write something, now, the example that I have for you, the first thing that kind of came to my head is we're going to compare two cities. So we're going to compare St. John and we're going to compare Toronto. Okay, so I'm going to use that Venn diagram again, which means I'm just going to draw two circles like this. Doesn't have to be neat, obviously. Mine aren't that neat, but that's okay. So things that are in similarities between these two. They're both cities, right? We're not dealing with towns or hamlets or anything smaller. So they're both cities. They're both Canadian. I'm not comparing, an American city to a Canadian city or a Belgian city to a French city. They're both Canadian cities. What else can we say about these two cities? Well, I know for sure St. John was the first city in Canada. I know that Toronto is currently the largest city in Canada. I know that Toronto is the most multicultural city. What else do I know? I know that this one has a very strong... Actually, well, they both have strong loyalist backgrounds. So we have loyalist. Right, but St. John has a very strong loyalist background. Sorry, these were specific people, so they get a capital. Loyalist background. Then we could talk about both have big industry. To varying degrees, but they both have big industry in them. So, I could kind of talk a little bit back and forth. They're both on the water. Whereas Toronto is on a lake. St. John is on the ocean, or on the bay. Depending on where you are. We could also talk about how this one has a big shipping industry. We could talk about how it's very, we have very much primary industry here. My writing's getting worse, I'm sorry. We have a lot of, like, tertiary industry. We have a lot of financial and all of that. So, in that way, Toronto is the capital of Ontario. Whereas St. John is just a big city, it's not the capital of anything. So in that way we can kind of compare them, and we can see sort of what are their, which colors I use, what are their similarities and what are their differences, right? So when we're comparing and contrasting, these are things that we want to talk about. So I gave kind of a very brief sort of, paragraph about this. I want your paragraph to be around, let's say, there's lots to talk about, let's say 7 to 10 sentences. I have faith in you guys that you could do this. 7 to 10 sentences. And they're structured a little bit different than your Oreo paragraphs, right? Oreo, just for any of you who are curious, that idea of the Oreo or the hamburger paragraph is more for an argumentative, you're trying to prove a point sort of paragraph. You're trying to support your opinion. This one right here is, we're going to have that idea of the hook to start off. So my hook right here, St. John and Toronto are both Canadian cities. Both would actually be another good kind of signal word in this case. Not one from my list, but a really great signal word. So we know I kind of have that introduction. And then I'm going to get around to just chatting about them. Using, again, those signal words, right? So both, although they are both located in the same country, they are very different. Unlike Toronto, St. John is a small city. However, St. John was the first city in Canada. Toronto has its own claim to fame too, right? As well as, or in addition to. It is the biggest city in Canada. Both cities are beautiful and should be a stop on your Canadian tour. Now keep in mind, mine is very short. I'm trying to give you just a nice short example, kind of what I'm looking for. And you can see already here, I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 different signal words. But in total I have, so I have 8 total, but 6 different. So in that short amount of time, I was able to put in a lot of signal words that show you that I'm comparing these two cities. And I'm going to ask in your paragraph, when you do yours, that you have, the 2 pictures, if you are able to. That would be great, so I can kind of see the 2 things that you're comparing. And then I'm going to ask you to write a paragraph where you're comparing 2 things. Now, I've chosen cities. It can be anything you like. It can be 2 things that you find on your desk. It can be 2 things that you see outside. Maybe you want to compare 2 different types of leaves that you've noticed that are starting to grow. Try to keep them in the same category. It makes it a little bit easier. It would be very difficult to compare something like, a city to a pen. You can do it, but let's start off nice and easy. Show me that you have this nice strong foundation. So choose a category, and I'm going to ask you to write. So you're going to write a paragraph, and again, I want it to be about 7 to 10 sentences in length. Where you're going to compare 2 different things. So use, that Venn diagram to help you plan if that's helpful for you. If you'd like to submit any of your planning, you're welcome to. I'm not expecting it, but if you want to show me, I did the Venn diagram and here's all my planning, here's all my thoughts, that's great. I'm always happy to look at that. So try to choose a thing, use the same category. Maybe you want to compare 2 different birds that have been flying around that you've been noticing. This is my version of a bird. Maybe that's a duckling. I don't know. Let's give it a nice beak. Yep, that's my bird. Alright, so maybe you want to compare 2 different birds. Maybe you want to compare 2 different leaves. If you can find the maple leaf and maybe a different kind of leaf. I'm really bad at leaves. And compare them. That's great. So choose something in the same category to make it nice and easy for you. I won't give you marks off if you choose a different category, but it will be more difficult. Keep that in mind. Provide a picture where possible of the 2 things that you are comparing. If you can, snap a photo of the 2 and you could put them into a PowerPoint slide like this. You could put them on Word. Do whatever kind of makes the most sense for you. Or you can just send me 2 pictures. That's fine. Use at least 3 of the words from the list. Okay, so here's that whole list again, in case you didn't get it down the first time, at least 3 of those ones. Now you can choose other ones as well. If you have words like both, or if something else seems to be a signal word for you, you can go ahead and choose that as well, but I want 3 from this list. So it should have, and it shouldn't be too hard to use 3 from that list, right? So use at least 3 from the list, 7 to 10 sentences, 2 items, choose the same category where possible to make it nice and easy for you, and provide a picture if you can. Keep in mind, you can also Google pictures as well. That's what I did for my pictures. That's totally fine. So Google them if you like, and then you can just plop them in like that. Okay, if you have any other questions, let me know. If you're one of my students that I'm making this video for, email me, write me on Microsoft Teams. You can also leave comments down there in the comment section, especially I know that it can be difficult for parents and tutors to get in touch with me sometimes because of the way that the contact works. So, I am monitoring right now my YouTube, so if you leave a comment, that would be great, and I can get in touch with you. But let me know if you have questions, and I look forward to seeing what you guys are writing. All right, bye, guys.